My name is Baron. Record. My name is Baron Bulcott, and I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at California Western School of Law. Thank you so much for having me here to join this session to talk a little bit about California Western, and also we're going to get into kind of how to secure strong letters of recommendation for law school. So first and foremost, I'll tell you a little bit about California Western. So again, I'm with California Western School of Law. We are located in San Diego, California. So for anybody who hadn't visited Southern California before, so it's basically as far south in California as you can get. We're about a couple hours south of Los Angeles. We are the oldest law school in San Diego. We've been around for 100 years. We're actually celebrating our centennial right now this year. Um, we are located right downtown, so we are within walking distance of a lot of the courthouses, a lot of the major law firms. Um, so we've got both a part-time program and a full-time JD program. So our full-time JD program is a day program, but for students who also want to continue working while they're going to law school, we do have a part-time evening program as well. Those classes typically tend to take place between 6 p.m. and around 9:30 p.m. Again, that program is designed more for working professionals. We have a variety of areas of concentration and pretty much a pathway to any area of law that any student might be interested in. Currently, our areas of concentration are business law, criminal justice, labor and employment law, intellectual property, international law, and social justice. Um, in general, we do place a lot of emphasis on practical hands-on education at California Western to make sure that our grads kind of hit the ground running right after graduation. So we have various legal clinics that allow you to work under with real clients under the supervision of a faculty member. And then once you get to your third year, we have a separate clinical externship program that allows students to work up to full time for a semester in your third year at like a law firm or a government agency or a nonprofit, and you can get up to 11 units of academic credit. So in addition to all the coursework, again, we do place a lot of importance on practical hands-on education. Lastly, I'll touch a little bit on financial aid and scholarships. Obviously, financial, how to pay for law school is usually on the forefront of everybody's questions. So we will consider you automatically with for our scholarships when you apply. Our scholarships are merit-based, so they will consider items like your LSAT scores and undergraduate GPAs. Um, so our scholarships can go anywhere from a few $1,000s a year all the way up to a full tuition scholarship. So in general, the higher your LSAT and GPA, the more competitive position you're putting yourself in for the higher percentage scholarships. And just for reference, our median LSAT for our last fall entering class was a 153. Our median GPA was a 3.4. And lastly, I'll note that we also do accept the GRE, and then there's also a new exam called JD Next. So for us, you don't necessarily have to take the LSAT. Any one of those three exams will work. Um, any questions about anything that I've covered so far? Feel free to place your questions either in the chat or use your raise your hand function, or simply just unmute yourselves to ask. Going once, going twice. Okay. And as we go through, if you have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and ask them in the chat or raise your hand as we go through. But I did want to start getting into kind of how to secure strong letters of recommendation. So again, when you apply to law schools, most law schools, they're going to ask for at least one and typically, two or three letters of recommendation. At California Western, we ask for two letters of recommendation. We don't place any limits on who they can be from, but generally, my advice would be keep them to either academic or professional sources. And you do want to double check with, each of the law schools that you might be interested in applying, just to make sure if they have any specific recommendations or requirements on what type of letters of recommendation that they ask for. Again, for us, it can be from anybody, but again, academic and professional ones are preferred. Um, Regarding how to secure strong recommendations, I mean, assuming you guys are all still in school, so especially if you're going to be applying to law school, shortly after finishing undergraduate, your undergraduate studies, I would say definitely shoot for getting at least one or both letters from academic sources. Academic sources are typically generally the are preferred, the strongest the best letters that you can get. Again, you're applying to law school, so the admissions committees generally want to hear from academic sources regarding your preparation for law school and how that recommender thinks you might do in law school. So a couple of ways to go, to start building relationships so that when the time comes, you can start asking for letters of recommendation, and your recommenders would be able to write strong letters. Since you're in school, if you have any professors that you have already, taken a couple courses with or have had a good relationship with, that you've gone and seen them in office hours or maybe had another contact with them, definitely keep that up. I would say, make an appointment to go talk to them. You don't just want to send an email saying like, hey, can you give me a recommendation? Go ahead and make an appointment to go see them at either office hours or a different time that works best for them. And just, sit down and just kind of tell them about your interest in law school, what you've been up to in your other academic work that, maybe they don't know about. It might be a good idea to have a copy of your transcript ready if they want to see it. Have a copy of your resume ready, so that you can talk to them about the types of things that you've been doing outside of school or in like student organizations, any leadership positions, anything that they want to see. And again, just have a chat about them regarding your interest in law school, and then, just ask if they would be willing to write you a letter of recommendation. If you have done any work, if you have any copies of like any papers that you've written in their courses or anything else, have them handy as well. Just, obviously many professors, they might have a class full of students, sometimes, in 300 students in a class. So it is helpful to have any reminders of your academic work that you've done for them. So again, if you haven't already started making good relationships with some professors, start right now. Um, do keep in mind academic letters don't have to necessarily come from professors. So if you have any teaching assistants that you regularly go to tutoring or office hours for, and you have a good relationship with them, don't hesitate to ask one from a TA as well, especially a TA who knows your work well and can again speak to your academic abilities and how that might translate to success in law school. So, if you're not comfortable or you don't think you'd be able to, start building a relationship with a professor yet, TAs are perfectly fine as well. Any questions so far on what we've covered? Okay. So I'll continue on. So those are again academic sources. And I will say give them also plenty of time. So law school applications typically open in the prior fall of the year that you're applying for. So for example, for next fall, fall of 2025, law school applications for most law schools opened around September 1st or so. But do keep in mind that your recommenders are, they're going to have other things on their plate, especially if they're professors, students, or your boss. So give them plenty of time. You don't want to rush it so that you're not giving them, you're putting them in a rush. So you want to kind of start figuring out um, which persons you want to be your recommenders, and a good give them a few months leeway, so maybe start thinking about that either in the summer prior that before you're going to apply, or get it as early as you can. So start essentially, yeah, start having those conversations with them, and then so that they're ready and thinking and maybe starting on a letter for you, so that this is not going to delay your law school applications. um, so moving on from academic sources, The next best will be professional sources. So, if you do wait to apply to law school, maybe not just after, not right after school, or maybe you just didn't have as good of a close relationship with professors, but you do have any bosses or supervisors that, can write you a good letter of recommendation. That's perfectly fine too. My general advice would be pick the two strongest recommenders that you can, whether they're academic or professional. In general, the strength of the letter, will matter more. If don't get an academic letter just for the sake of getting an academic one. If it's going to be, 3 lines long and the professor is just going to say, hey, I kind of remember them from my class of 300. It looks like they got an A, I would recommend them. Those letters just really are not particularly helpful to admissions committees in law school. So you do want to essentially take the opportunity to add value to your application. Think of the letters of recommendation as just another component of the application process that where you have the opportunity to add value and definitely show admissions committees that there are people out there that think very highly of you and of your abilities to ultimately succeed in law school. So again, if you have any professional sources, that are going to speak to your professional abilities, and especially those that might translate well to success in law school, such as maybe time management skills, any writing skills, analysis skills, anything that you've done kind of in your professional environment that might translate well to success in law school. Those can be very helpful as well. In general, avoid any letters from family or friends. We definitely see those on a weekly basis. I've even seen letters from somebody's mom, recommending them. So in general, yeah, you don't, as much as your mom is gonna, I'm sure, give you a glowing letter of recommendation, you typically want to avoid family or friends. Um, some of the ones that I also see that, I would encourage you to avoid. Oh, let me see. I think we have a question in the chat, so I'll address that. That Anna says, is there a time frame that we should get the recommendation letters before applying? I'm graduating spring 2026. Um, so in general, I mean, different law schools might have different recommendations for the timing. I mean, at the time you're submitting the recommendation, I mean, they should generally be, dated within about a year or so. So you don't want to do it too early. And if you're graduating spring of 2026, so I'm assuming if you're applying, let's say for fall of 2026, so you probably want to start, speaking to your, or you can start speaking to your professors, as early as you want, but you generally will want them to start working on your letters probably sometime in the summer of 2025, because typically you'll want to be start applying to law schools in the fall of 2025 for fall of 2026. So you want to make sure it's, fairly recent around that time when you're submitting your application. But you can definitely start, I'd say, if they can start writing it, a few months before, when you think you're actually going to submit your applications. We don't have a specific age limit, but for letters, but you don't want, you generally don't want letters that are like, 2 or more years old when you're applying. You do want them to be somewhat recent. Great. Any other questions? Again, you can put them in the chat or just raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask it. All right. I think what I was going to get into is some students, they definitely do have, well-connected families who might have family friends who are maybe judges, politicians, even like senators, congressmen. So generally avoid getting letters of recommendation, I will say, from people who are in that position that you have not personally worked for in their office. So I get letters from judges, again, senators, politicians that say, oh, I know John's family since he was little. I watched him grow up, and we've had conversations about law school. He's a great kid. I think he would do really well in law school. Those letters, unfortunately, they don't add anything to your law school application. They don't bring any value. Law school admissions committees, they don't care that it's, your family knows a senator and that senator is, writing on your behalf. If you've actually worked for that person, either like clerked for that judge, or actually worked for that politician, in their office, and they can actually speak to your professional abilities, definitely, that's perfectly fine. So, if you, again, intern for them, work for them, and they've kind of experienced and seen your work product, then by all means, yeah, that's perfectly fine to get. But avoid, again, getting letters from people just because of their title if they don't actually know you in a professional capacity. Um, See, and again, the same thing holds my advice that for academic for professional as well. I mean, obviously, go and have a meeting with that boss or supervisor. It doesn't have to be your current employer. I mean, it could be somebody that you worked for before. Again, remind them of like the types of things that you've been doing since. Have a copy of your resume handy, and then again, yeah, just have a meeting with them. Just kind of let them know about your interest in applying to law school, and ultimately kind of catch up with them, and then see if they'd be willing to write you a letter of recommendation. For the letters, I mean, you can tell them kind of some expectations. Many of them may have already written, letters of recommendation and they're familiar, but if they're not, you can encourage them to write, as detailed a letter as possible. And again, let them know that you're happy to provide any information that they can ask for as a reminder of, anything that you've done in a professional or academic setting when you work with them. We don't want the letters just to be 3, 4 lines that say, hey, we work with them and they were great. The more detail that they can provide, the stronger the letter will be. Again, giving maybe specific examples of, what sets you apart from maybe, other interns or people that they've worked with or other students that they've taught. Again, just providing more concrete, specific examples of kind of what sets you apart. What are some of your skills that are going to translate really well to law school? And, again, essentially what's going to make you successful in law school. I already covered giving them, again, plenty of time. Um, any questions on anything that we've covered so far? I mean, in general, that is how to secure strong letters of recommendation in a nutshell. Again, give them plenty of time, go and meet with your recommenders, bring everything relevant, either assignments from their class, your copy of your resume, transcript, anything that they might need or ask for. And again, just talk to them about, what you're interested in, and then, see if they have any questions, tell them about, the time expectation of a timeline, and then, yeah, and again, you can, give them some pointers if you want about, letters of recommendation, especially if they're not that familiar with it. But I imagine most people, typically, especially in the academia, they will have written a letter of recommendation or two. Again, that is everything that I wanted to cover on my end. But again, I'm happy to take questions to go into any further detail about anything. Okay, if there are no questions, does anybody have any questions about not just related to letters of recommendation, but anything under mind about either California Western or law school admissions in general? Any other questions about other components of the applications? Just in general, we do a holistic application review. So we will consider, things like your test scores, your undergraduate GPA, but also other items like personal statement, letters of recommendation, copy of your resume. They're all going to be important in the application process. Letters of recommendation, they're definitely an important component of the application, especially if you're kind of on the fence, maybe a borderline of, potentially getting admitted or not. They can definitely make a difference one way or the other. So we do want you to, think about the recommenders that you're gonna ask, and give it some thought and not just, rush this part of your application. Again, it's letters of recommendation, again, should be from people who think highly of you and can definitely write a positive recommendation. We do get letters from time to time that, aren't very strong or positive. I mean, that does definitely raise a red flag with admissions committees, especially if, we're only asking for one or two letters and, the person that you approach is, doesn't seem like they were really willing to do it or is writing a strong one. So definitely do think about it. Again, if you've got time, if you're still, obviously if you're in school, start building those relationships. So we have a question about, is JD Next comparable to the LSAT when considering an applicant? Um, yeah, so JD Next is fairly new. So this past fall of 2024 was the first year that some law schools started accepting it and got a variance from the ABA to start accepting it. I would say the first difference is pay attention to or check in with the schools that you're interested in applying to and see if they accept JD Next. I think for fall 2024, there was only about roughly a quarter of law schools out there who accepted it. I mean, that's probably more now, but definitely double check and see if everybody who you want to apply to, does accept JD Next. Because if you do go that route, I mean, it will limit your options to a certain extent because there'll definitely be schools who don't accept it. Um, JD Next is a little different than the LSAT in that it's a little less like a standardized exam. It's actually an 8-week long online course that you do. And then with an exam at the end, kind of based on like some of the concepts that you learned and your understanding of them and such. Um, since JD Next is so new and we just started accepting, considering students for that this past fall, law schools are not going to have a long history of, how that exam score translates to success in law school. We'll definitely have more information once we're done with this year, to see anybody admitted with JD Next, kind of, how they did. So different law schools might approach it differently. We are definitely a little bit more conservative with the JD Next at this point, again, because there is no there's not as much of a history of how those students performed in a law school setting. So the students who we did accept who had a JD Next score, I mean, they did tend to have fairly good JD Next scores, maybe in like the top 20, 30 percentile of that exam, where the LSAT, we definitely have a lot more of a history. So somebody who's closer to maybe like the median LSAT score, we've definitely had students, who are admitted with that or even below the median, but with JD Next, just keep in mind that, the schools might be a little bit more cautious with those scores. So, if you are going to go the JD Next route, you definitely probably want to shoot for a higher score from a percentile wise compared to the LSAT. But again, I would encourage you to reach out to each individual school that you're interested in and see how they might view the JD Next or how they consider it in the application process because since it's so new, each law school might be slightly different. That answer your question? Perfect. Any other questions? Again, about anything regarding law school admissions, California Western. Okay. I did just want to mention that, we also do virtual campus tours weekly. Those are typically done by one of our current students. So if, obviously you're in Florida, so you may not be in, Southern California, unless you're here on vacation. So doing a virtual campus tour will also, again, help to see our campus on Zoom, but also it'll give you the opportunity to speak with one of our current students and get a sense from them regarding what they like, what they don't like, how the professors are, classes are. And let me try to find that link. I will put it in the chat. So if anybody is interested in booking a virtual campus tour, I just put the link in the chat as well. And when you are applying to law schools, just a little tip, so most law schools, the applications open in the fall. We're on rolling admissions. So, if we start reviewing applications, our application opens September 1st, and when we typically start reviewing them around October or November timeframe. So after that, you'll typically get a decision within about 4 to 6 weeks after it goes into review. So if you apply now, I mean, chances are you'll get a decision probably before the end of the year or early January. We and along with many law schools, will plan admitted student days, typically in the spring, anywhere from February to May timeframe. We will have one coming up for the fall 2025 admitted students in March and then in April. So that's a great time to, go and visit schools that you haven't had a chance to visit before. Many law schools will potentially provide some sort of like travel stipend or reimbursement up to a certain amount. Again, you may want to double check with schools whether they offer that or not. We do, it may not cover the whole cost of it, but it'll cover, a decent portion that can definitely help. So especially if you're in Florida and you want to go visit schools out in like California, do pay attention to those and maybe wait for some of those invitations for admitted student events if you apply on the earlier side and you've already gotten a decision, maybe by like January or so, you should probably start seeing some of those. So again, that's typically a good time to plan a visit if you want to do out of state schools. Let's see, anything else? Any other questions on your mind? Anything that we didn't cover that you wish we would cover? Okay, if there are no questions, I'm not sure, Jarell, if you're on here, I might turn it back over to you.
Yes. Oh wait, I think I just got one. Oh, there's a thank you. So yeah, thank you again so much for coming out and speaking with us today. Can you provide us with your contact information so that way students can reach out to you if they do have any questions that they do come across after this meeting? And then I am also going to send out the survey for you guys to take. Please take that. Let us know your feedback on our um, Talk Tuesdays and what you think about it. Thank you for your email. Ron has dropped it in the chat, so you guys can screenshot that, copy that for you guys to have, as well as the admissions email. Thank you so much. Do you have any final remarks that you would like to make before we let the students go?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, so you've got my email there, and also I put the admissions email. That email goes to everybody in the admissions office. So, if I'm out of the office, then somebody else will reply. So either email is fine. I wanted to thank you all again so much for having me on. Yeah, if you do have any other questions, always feel free to reach out. Especially for those of you who are thinking of applying to law school, maybe for next fall or following fall fairly quickly. My general advice would be, when you're applying to law schools, cast a wide net. You never know where you're going to end up and what kind of offers that you're going to get. For us at California Western, we don't charge an application fee. I actually grew up in Atlanta and I went to college in Atlanta. And then when I applied to law schools, back in the day, I applied to schools all around the country. I was lucky enough to get into California Western with a good scholarship, and then I did go to one of those admitted student events, and really loved the school, the students, the people here. So then I ended up going to Cal Western and haven't looked back. I had a great experience at California Western as a student. Some of the things I didn't mention already. California Western is one of the most diverse law schools in the nation. For our fall entering class, we were 55% diverse from a racial or ethnic standpoint, 65% identified as women, 45% were actually first generation college students, 16% were identified as LGBTQ, 5% were veterans or had military, service experience. We're a very diverse and inclusive school. We have over 30 student organizations. There's always something going on. We're a very collegial and supportive school. Um, I had a wonderful experience here. I met my wife here. So again, when you're applying to law schools, cast a wide net, go and visit as many schools as you can for the ones that you've gotten admitted to. If you do that, you'll definitely get a feel for whether that school is the right one for you, especially if you go to those admitted student events and talk with current students, faculty, staff. You'll generally get a feeling like, hey, I can definitely see myself here. So that would be my general advice for the process.
Thank you again so much, and thank you so much for joining as well. If that is all, and no one else has any further questions, I hope the rest of you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.